Donald J. Trump was on the defensive all week, battered from all sides for his heated statements hailing the Second Amendment and linking political opponents to the Islamic State. But on Friday morning, Mr. Trump rose early to strike back at his favorite adversary. Ratings challenged at CNN reports so seriously that I call President Obama and Clinton, the founder of ISIS, Mr. Trump fumed on Twitter shortly after dawn. They don't get sarcasm. He soon fired off another jibe. I love watching these poor, pathetic people, pundits, on television working so hard and so seriously to try and figure me out, Mr. Trump taunted. They can't. The social media broadside was no aberration. Long a vehement critic of the political news media, Mr. Trump has increasingly organized his general election effort around antagonizing the press. He dedicates long sections of his speeches and innumerable tweets to savaging individual outlets, and claiming that media bias could effectively rig the election for Hillary Clinton. At times, his enthusiasm for venting anger about the news media has seemed to rival his interest in criticizing Mrs. Clinton. In theory, on Friday, Mr. Trump swerved back and forth between attacks on Mrs. Clinton and an extended airing of grievances about the press. The news media, he said, was determined to cover up Mrs. Clinton's missteps and highlight his own. Mr. Trump allowed that Fox News, home to several anchors who openly favor his candidacy, was an exception. These people are the lowest form of life, I'm telling you, he said, pointing at the journalists covering his rally. They are the lowest form of humanity. In Altoona, on Friday evening, Mr. Trump continued his diatribe. It is so ridiculous, the pile on, he complained of the coverage of his campaign. Every single day, story after story after story. Mr. Trump's crowd-pleasing allegations of news media malevolence also serve a tactical purpose, providing him license to revise or play down his remarks. After stating several times this week that he considered Mr. Obama to be the founder of the Islamic State, Mr. Trump reversed course on Friday with a declaration that he had only been speaking sarcastically and that the press simply did not understand. In Pennsylvania, he reiterated that he had been sarcastic, but added, "Not that sarcastic, to be honest with you." Republicans often complain about the national news media, arguing that most reporters and publications are tilted against them. In the 1992 presidential race, Republicans even produced a bumper sticker urging voters to annoy the media by re-electing President George Bush. And in his 2016 primary campaign, Senator Marco Rubio of Florida accused the press of being the equivalent of a super PAC for Democrats. On the Democratic side, Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont fulminated this year about the corporate media, which he described as hostile to liberal ideals. And aides and supporters of Mrs. Clinton routinely complain that reporters treat her unfairly. But the Trump campaign has made accusations of news media bias the pervasive theme, and has attacked publications and reporters with virulence. Since last year, Mr. Trump has made a practice of riling up his crowds with mockery of the media, often pointing to the press risers and describing reporters as dishonest. In Erie on Friday, his audience jeered each time Mr. Trump mentioned a news outlet, and at one point many in the crowd turned their backs on him to face the press and expressed their contempt with a variety of shouts and gestures. "Dinosaur media is failing," one man yelled. Mr. Trump's slashing attacks have generated embarrassing scenes for his campaign, as agitated Trump fans have acted on his goading. On Thursday night, videos circulated widely online of an angry Trump supporter berating reporters and making an obscene gesture in their direction in Kissimmee, Florida. In one instance during the primaries, Katie Tur, a reporter for NBC News, reported she was escorted to her car by the Secret Service after a rally in which Mr. Trump assailed her by name. If bashing the media proved an effective way of rallying the Republican base to his side during the primaries, Mr. Trump must now prove himself to a broader community of voters in the general election, who are far less preoccupied with the notion of press bias. Republican strategists see Mr. Trump's offensive mainly as an exercise in thin-skinned defensiveness, rather than a shrewd political strategy. Kevin Madden, a former spokesman for Mitt Romney's and George W. Bush's presidential campaigns, said Mr. Trump was veering away from issues actually weighing on swing voters, which he said were economy and security focused. "Whining about media coverage is just that, it's whining," Mr. Madden said. Of complaints, Mr. Madden said, "Any campaign that tells you it makes a difference with swing voters is just lying to themselves and lazy, because it's easier than developing an actual strategy or message." Still, Mr. Trump has intensified his comments, and his top surrogates have raced to join him. Rudolph W. Giuliani, the former New York City mayor, engaged in a tense half-hour colloquy on CNN on Thursday, insisting that the media had wronged Mr. Trump in its treatment of his candidacy. "A lot of coverage is rigged," Mr. Giuliani said. And the Trump campaign, which for months has kept a list of outlets barred from receiving press credentials to cover his events, has now taken to putting out regular emails that attack newspapers and websites for alleged bias. The emails feature lengthy denunciations of the offending outlet, accompanied by an image of the publication with a red or yellow stamp over it reading, "Media Bias Offender." The messages also include offensive headlines, highlighted with circles around them, mimicking Mr. Trump's habit of cutting out newspaper articles and circling in marker what he finds objectionable. Ari Fleischer, the former White House press secretary under Mr. Bush, said Mr. Trump was so far behind in the campaign that his fixation on the press was unlikely to help. Mr. Fleischer, who holds that there is an overarching ideological edge toward Democrats in the media, said Mr. Trump was using claims of news media bias to cover for his own missteps. Mr. Trump's offhand comment about Second Amendment people, which was widely interpreted as a joke about assassinating politicians, was a case in point, Mr. Fleischer said. "When I first heard it and then saw the print coverage of it, I thought, this is the media again, taking it too far," Mr. Fleischer said. "And then I watched the video and I thought, what a fool. This is bona fide. He's created this problem for himself."